Now, the Mughals were this empire that emerged in India in the 1500s. But if I were to ask you, who were the Mughals ethnically, what would you say? Honestly, tell me below in the comments, what would you say? Who were the Mughals? Would you call them Turks, Mongols, Indians, Central Asians? Well, the weird thing about the Mughals is that they're actually very, very hard to place. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. Hi, my name is Misha and welcome to Tarihi Tales. If you like this channel and you want to help us grow, there are a number of ways you can help us out. The best would be to go on Patreon and become a paid member. Other than that, you can become a paid member of this channel or use the number on screen if you're in Pakistan to help us out. And you can always like, share, subscribe, comment. All of that good stuff really helps us out as well. If you want to see where I get all my sources from, all of them will be listed down below in the description box. So, back to the Mughals. Now, the Mughals, who originated from Central Asia, even though they were converted into Islam, they actually held on to a lot of their Central Asian culture. Their culture was initially as well very adaptable and seamlessly integrated other things into it quite easily. So when the people that we're calling the Mughals, now just a note, I know that the Mughal Empire is really not the right term, but we're going to keep calling them Mughals just because that's the way they're usually known to the world now, okay? So the people that we're calling the Mughals, the one who established a dynasty in India, now when their ancestors initially accepted Islam, what happened was that a layer of Arabian culture actually formed over their own Central Asian culture. So now they had influences from the culture of Saudi Arabia. It wasn't like they intentionally made these changes, but when you adopt a new religion, naturally there are going to be some changes that seep into you. And a lot of these things were also things from the culture of the Arabs. So the Central Asian heritage of the Mughals now had a layer on top of it which was adapted from the Arabs. Then soon after, things shifted again because now the Mughals came in contact with the sophisticated culture of Iran, Persia. The arrival of Persian women into their courts especially brought a notable change within their conducts. You could also see a lot of Iranian and Persian influence within their arts and their taste at the same time. But then the Mughals went and settled in Hindustan, in the Indian subcontinent. And when they settled there, they actually started adapting a lot of their customs into their own lives as well. Now, the Chagatai Turkic heritage that they had, that group wasn't one that stuck to their roots, with all their life. It was always a very adaptable kind of a culture. And with the Mughals, we see exactly how much adaptability they could have had. After settling in India, soon the emperors actually started seeing themselves as Indian because they would not only have matrimonial ties with the families in India, but would also be brought up in that culture, right? So this blending of culture that the Mughals had from the very get-go was something that was very different and which made them a lot different to the Muslim stereotype that you would imagine that, well, they have these strict rules, they have this exact culture. It wasn't the case for the Mughals. They had cultures and influences from all over the place and they were seeping them in. And you can see the same thing when you look at their lineage as well. Now, Timur, who was the founder of the Timurid Empire and whose descendant was Babur, who founded the Mughal dynasty in India. Now, Timur himself had a mix of Turkish and Mongol heritage. And the same thing can be said about Babur, who was the first emperor of the Mughal Empire. He again had Turkish, Timurid, and Mongol heritage. But the same cannot be said about his son, Humayun, because Humayun, from one side, he actually got the Central Asian heritage that Babur had. But from the other side, he may have gotten Persian heritage, which came from Maham Begum. Now, after that, the famous king Akbar, his mother was from Transoxania. So he had a completely different heritage as well because he had obviously this Timurid line coming, but then there were these other strong influences from these women that were from completely different cultures. And unlike some other cultures where, these other women coming into the court would let go of their own identity and would conform to the ways of the Mughals, these women actually kept a lot of their culture and that influence was shown within the Mughal Empire itself. And we see that the Rajput princesses of Jodhpur actually added another layer to this mix when the princess of Jodhpur gave birth to the next king in line, which was Shehzada Salim. So now there's also intermarriage with the Indians themselves. And this mixture of culture actually gave the Mughals a very different psychology than what you would see with the Arabs of the time, who were strictly against intermarriage between other cultures or other castes. They would strictly marry within the Arabs and keep to themselves. And all of this mingling actually allowed the Mughals to go beyond their singular Muslim identity. They were actually able to adopt things and do things which are not inherently strictly Muslim, but did add a lot of flexibility to them and to their empire. Now, even when you look at their languages, you can see the same kind of fusion taking place there as well. Initially, the Mughals actually started out with Chagatai Turkic as their native language. But then, along with that, they added Arabic to the mix as their religious language. Sometime after, when they were in India, they were influenced heavily by the Persian courts, as I mentioned, and their literature and art and all of that seemed very superior. So eventually, Persian became the language of the court, of the literature as well. But soon afterwards, when they were settled in India, obviously, the area around Delhi had this language of Hindustani, which has now kind of transformed into both Urdu and Hindi, and that was what became the language of the Mughals. The Hindustani language then became their spoken language. Now, like the other Muslim dynasties of the time, for example, the Arabs, now when the Arabs would conquer a place, they would swiftly start with the conversions of people, and then usually they would take those other areas from non believers, from non Muslims, right? But when the Mughals came into India, the story was completely different. Babur actually got access of India by defeating another Muslim king, Ibrahim Lodi, and he actually used the help of different Indian Rajputs to kind of do this. So the dynamic from the very beginning was very different than what you would expect. So this meant that there was no wide-scale imposition of Islam on the local population. And eventually, when you would see things like intermarriage with the House of Rajput, that actually elevated the local Rajput dynasty to something similar to the royalty at that time, and kind of changed the status quo as well. So even with their language, with the way they're conquering lands, and with the way they're adapting to art, you can see that they're not really conforming to their Muslim identity, and they're very flexible. They're allowing for a lot of fusion, and that's not always strictly part of the Sharia or part of what you would expect a strict Muslim ruler to be like. But that's the point. The Mughals were really not one or the other, And you'd think that, okay, this is just a coincidence, like the Mughals somehow turned out like this. But the thing is, during the time of history when the Mughals actually came to India, there was a wave of such things going around the world, a wave of openness and flexibility. I've used this word so many times, but it fits. Movements like the Renaissance in Europe, the Mahdi movement, the Ming revival in China, the eclectic Sufi movement, and India's Bhakti cult, all of these things actually contributed to the spirit of fusion. And the Mughals actually arrived in India at the height of these waves and kind of absorbed all the undercurrents of these movements all around the world, and it became a part of them, being adaptable. Ultimately, it actually played to their strengths. This became one of their strengths, the fact that they're able to absorb other cultures into themselves was what allowed them to be one of the people who conquered a vast majority of India, which was something that has been rarely been done. And that's why I said, it's very difficult to place the Mughals, because one of them you can call, well, maybe Chagatai Turkic, Babur. But when you look at the rest, the entire dynasty, it's very difficult to say what they were because of their dynamic, like intermingling with the locals, with the Persians, with the Arabic culture. All of that actually had a lasting effect on their identity. And it's not just one identity then. The identity is then always changing. That's why I said the Mughals are a very difficult to place dynasty. And this was just a short video just to kind of show you how we see things when we look at history from like a singular perspective. But if you delve deep into it, there's so many layers and it's always so dynamic. And not to say that everything was all peace and everybody was welcome. Obviously, it's an empire, it's history. There were fights, there were factions they didn't like, there were issues. But the Mughal Empire does have the distinction of being one of the few empires in the world that was so accepting, even on the royal level, to different cultures. Obviously, the acceptability varied from emperor to emperor, as we know, and as is the case with all dynasties. But there we go. That was a small tidbit of how dynamic certain things are, and how, when you're looking back into history, we might not always see those different layers unless they're spelled out to us. So let me know if you like this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. If you want to learn more about the Mughals, I have a lot of videos about them. You can head on over to this playlist and enjoy.